Alright, so this time I want to get into a topic that, for whatever reason, I heard about this like years ago, but at the time I was using just a regular water filter, like a Berkey water filter, that basically, doesn't remove any of the minerals in the water. It's just supposed to remove, like, certain pathogens and all, just certain types of things out of the water, and it's supposed to get rid of, most of the contaminants, but it leaves all the minerals in and stuff like that. So at the time, I used that water filter for like, several years, and it wasn't until just recently that I noticed that I hadn't replaced the filter in like, 2 or 3 years, and I started noticing that the water was tasting funny, and basically I just, I didn't know how to check, to see whether the water was really being filtered or not. I didn't know, how to get a meter to test that. I didn't know if you need lab equipment to do that or whatever. But basically, I did some more research online, and there's something called a TDS meter, which stands for total dissolved solids, and like this basically tells you how clean your water is as far as the contaminants that are in it. And when I tested the water, like what I did was I just tested my tap water directly, and it came up with a number of like 280 or something like that, which is pretty high, which is pretty standard for tap water. And then I also tested it in my water filter, and that also came out almost exactly the same. It was like 278 or something like that. So basically, I had been probably drinking tap water for at least a few months before I realized it, and that got me, that pushed me into looking into other filtering options. Because, I didn't like the fact that with filters, you never really know what it's filtering out. It can be claiming to filter out, X amount of things, but how do you really know, So I got into this distilled water subject, which like I said, I had heard about years ago, but it wasn't until recently, after I decided to ditch my water filter, to look into it. And what I found out is very interesting in more ways than one. Basically, with water distillation, and especially with steam distillation, it's just a very simple, natural process of basically boiling water and and then the steam that's left over from that boiled water, you collect that steam, and you go through a tube, and it comes out in a separate container, and that container basically contains almost zero contaminants, from the water. Like you can put tap water in there, and it'll take out like every single type of fluoride or chlorine or anything like that, and you end up with basically 100% pure water, which is, you think, what you should be drinking, right? 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, H2O. But if you look this up online, and even more interesting, if you look at what anyone in the so-called truth community has to say about it, they're always downplaying it or avoiding the topic, as if it's like, I've even heard people go as far as to say it's dangerous and, you're going to die if you drink this stuff regularly. When I start to think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because, rainwater, like when it first comes out of the clouds is purely distilled. And, obviously as it travels, through the sky, it collects all the contaminants and crap that are in the sky nowadays, like, chemtrails or geoengineering or whatever you want to call it. And by the time it, hits the ground, it's probably been through all kinds of contaminants. The basic argument that people make against distilled water is that they claim that it's dangerous because it removes minerals from your body. Because when it's in its purest form, it doesn't have any minerals, and their thinking is that, well, in nature, animals and stuff don't naturally drink water until it falls on the ground and it's in a stream and it collects minerals from the rocks that are in the landscape or whatever, which is true, but it's like it's just as natural when it starts out in its pure form before it collects all those minerals. So I don't see, logically speaking, how that could be a dangerous thing. But that's the argument that they use anyway, to try to dissuade people away from even trying distilled water as a drinking solution. Instead, like you'll see in the stores, like everything will be labeled drinking water. And basically they make it sound like if it doesn't have crap in it, then you shouldn't be drinking it. And it's like, it's like, I can understand, minerals being healthy for you and everything, but that's another thing altogether too, is like, if you look into it, food is where you get the vast majority of your minerals. I've heard, percentages quoted like 95%, 90 to 95% of your minerals you get from food. And that seems to make sense to me. And another thing I found out is that supposedly with distilled water, it does actually remove minerals from your body, but the thing is that it's inorganic minerals and not organic ones, which to me seems like a good thing, wouldn't it? Because you don't want stuff in your system that's inorganic and just basically your body can't use it. So wouldn't that lead to arthritis and what a lot of other problems that people are having nowadays? So if it really is removing just inorganic minerals like it's claimed, I think that would be the way to go. I mean, you'd be curing people of lots of issues with their bones and everything. So, yeah, all those things considered, and just the fact that I look at the basic logical stuff, like how can pure water, the same stuff as rainwater that originally comes out of the clouds, like how can that be bad for you? It doesn't make any sense at all. But yet, if you comment on any forum or anything, you'll get these same people that will come up right away and be like, don't drink that stuff, it's bad for you, you're gonna end up with major issues and stuff. And to me, this falls in the same realm of like flat earth, for example, where it's something you never actually questioned, you just heard a bunch of people saying stuff about it, and you're like, well, the people you heard, like, well, they seem fairly knowledgeable, and they seem to be talking about all these other important issues in the world, so I'm just going to take their word for it. I'm not going to study any further on it. And like I said, that to me, that's like the same with flat earth. Like, to me, you can look at 800 million different things about why you think the flat is earth or round or whatever shape you think it should be, but I just look at a few basic things. To me, no one can ever answer me this question, and that's like when you pour water on anything, it doesn't matter what you pour it on, it will always be level from one end to the other. It'll always be perfectly level. So if supposedly the earth is a sphere or a globe, how the heck is that water bending around the entire earth if no matter what you do with water, it always self-levels, it always levels itself out? And the only excuse you get that you hear from people is like, well, the water is curving, you just can't see it because, the earth is so vast and big. But yet they can never prove that. they just tell you that, well, trust me, if you measured it far enough, and they've even done tests where they've measured like several miles where supposedly you're supposed, according to science that we hear about, is that there's supposed to be a certain amount of curvature every so many feet or so many miles, but if you actually measure it, it's still flat, perfectly flat no matter what you do. So anyways, going back to the whole distilled water discussion, just tying that in there, is that people just, they don't look at they don't ask themselves basic questions. They just kind of take things at face value from what they've heard from other people, and they don't dig into it any further. Like I've had this discussion, lately with a few so-called truthers, and right away they're like, no, I've heard about that. It takes minerals out of your body. It's like, did you even research into that? Did you even do your own research, look a little further into it, and see the skeptic side? And they'll admit, no, I really didn't. But it's like, it just makes sense to me that other types of water would be better for you, like spring water, for example. People are hyping up spring water as, the ultimate water, and it's like, well, that stuff, contains all the contaminants, from chemtrails or geoengineering in the sky, and, all the junk that could be in your groundwater. And it's like, how is that? It's like, how can that be better than just a simple process of boiling water, turning into steam, and then removing all the contaminants? It's like, it makes no logical sense to me. But I know I'll get all the same kinds of people with comments on this video afterwards about how I'm totally wrong, but they'll probably use the same arguments, and they won't answer some of the questions I put forward. So whatever. But basically, to end this video, I just want to say that I don't know, well, first of all, you probably noticed in the background, I did get a water distiller. There's all kinds of different ones, and I don't, I'm not even going to name, what I got, because then people will say like, oh, I'm trying to promote a product or whatever and all this crap. Because basically I just, I've always been a person of truth, and if something doesn't add up, I just ask questions about it, and I want to figure out, whether it's legit or not. And it's sad that even within, the truther community, everyone's divided into camps, like, you need to believe in this, that, or the other thing, or you're not a serious truther, or, it's just stupid that it has to be that way. But like I said, it's like a broken record. I'm basically talking about this in every video. But basically, I just want people to, question everything, and I think this distilled water is a very interesting topic. I have a lot more topics that I want to get into. Mainly, I want to get into things that I'm, the gray areas I'm not sure about. A lot of times I'll just talk about certain topics, but I won't, I won't get into the things that I don't think are true. I'll just say like, I believe this or that. But I think it's important to also say the things that I think are iffy, like they may or may not be true. Because then the problem is people automatically assume, if you don't mention what you think might be a lie or might not be the truth, then they automatically assume that you must think that's true based on what other people have said. And that's not the case. I try to get all the facts on everything, but I, just like a lot of people, I don't do as much research as I should into things. It's just because there's so many factors to consider, and who even knows what the truth is anymore on a lot of this stuff, because we know by now, if you've been looking into all this, that there really is no official truth. It's just what you consider to be true based on what you've heard from other people, and you know, what seems to be common sense or make the most sense to you. At least that's what I go by on truth. So anyway, thanks for watching. I know it's been a while since I've done a video, but I stated those reasons why, you know, at the beginning. So that's all I got to say for now, and I'll see you guys next time.